Hello, everybody, and welcome to our in-session webinar, Inclusion, Innovation, Impact. We have over 300 guests registering to this event from 44 countries joining us today. Thank you for joining. Before I introduce you to our esteemed speakers, Ninela and Oluchi, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping items. Today's webinar is being recorded. We will share the recording on our event page at some point this week. We invite you to ask questions by using the Q&A button. You can upvote any questions that you like, and we will endeavor to get through as many questions as time allows. And without further ado, please join me in welcoming our speakers. I'm going to hand you over to Ninela, who's going to start today's conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jo, and welcome everyone. I'm delighted to see we have a very diverse audience today across geographies, disciplines, and occupations. And this is particularly exciting for me in relation to today's topic, which has inclusion and diversity at its heart. We are at a pivotal moment in history. COVID-19 is seen as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to build on the ethos of cooperation and collaboration that has so far underpinned crisis management and solutions finding, and work together towards reestablishing, transforming, and leading a robust, agile, and prosperous economy. The UK is Build Back Better campaign places people at the heart of economic recovery and calls on businesses to make innovation central to everything they do. Innovation is the lifeblood of business, is the central tenet for the UK government's innovation strategy, leading the future by creating it. Same for the London Recovery Board. It emphasized that inclusive and collaborative cross-cutting approaches of stakeholder engagement are essential to deliver long-term economic and social impact. And the World Economic Forum calls again for smart, clean, and inclusive approaches to addressing uncertainty and business risks. For us designers, this is great news. It creates scope to employ inclusive design as a mechanism for stakeholder inclusion and engagement in the solutions finding throughout the whole process. And we know that this is what design does best. It enables an equitable platform for co-creating solutions that are people-centered, stakeholder inclusive, and have that vision for long-term sustainability and impact. But what is the other side of the coin? So that's design. How does business itself define inclusion, innovation, and impact? What is the business value? What are some of the barriers, challenges, and what are the outcomes of inclusive innovation for the person of one, for the organization itself, and for global economies? My name is Ninela, and I'm an innovation fellow at the Helen Hamlin Center for Design here at the Royal College of Art. I lead our Inclusive Design for Business Impact area. And today I have the great pleasure of speaking with Oluchi Ikechi-Demiko to unpack the meaning and value of these three terms: inclusion, innovation, impact. Oluchi, or Oli, as she has allowed me to call her, is a business restructuring advisor with led over 15 wide-scale complex merger acquisition programs. She's partner at Ernst & Young, where she's head of strategy and transaction for Asia Pacific capital markets. She has also previously built and led Accenture's business restructuring unit in the UK for capital markets. The main reason why I wanted to speak with Oli today is her passion and dedicated work to inclusive innovation and leadership. She has built products from scratch to help clients and sponsored Accenture's FinTech Accelerator programs and Innovation Challenge initiatives across capital markets. She's a vocal advocate, ambassador, blogger, regular panelist, and multiple business award winner for next generation leadership with a focus on innovation, diversity, and inclusion, notably featuring as Management Today's 35 Women Under 35 in 2019. She's also the board member for Business in the Community London, focused on inclusive entrepreneurship. And she's the founder of Fully Bossed, and she will tell us, I'm sure, a little bit more about this today, helping to advance career using soft skills. and also Stanford Graduate Business School. I mean, Ollie, where do I stop? So I would now like to bring Ollie on stage. I have prepared a few questions for her, but please do use the Q&A function as we progress through the discussion. We will have sufficient time to take audience questions. Hello, Ollie, and thank you for being with us today.
Well, firstly, thank you for having me. I think when you hear somebody speak about the things that you've done, it's quite humbling. So I was just listening, going, "Is that me?" So thank you for having me. Firstly, on what I love to talk about, the three together. It was really hard to say no because, as you know, I'm quite passionate about each one of these topics. So I'm really excited to get into detail with you today.
Thank you, Ollie. So can we start with a little bit of your personal narrative? Could you tell us about yourself, your background? How did you begin working in innovation?
Yeah, sure. I'm exactly going to do that, give you the personal, because I think you've done everything else with the bio that you just read. So for me, how did I start getting into innovation? So just a little bit of personal context. So I'm born and raised in London in the UK. My heritage is Nigerian. My parents immigrated from Nigeria, moved to London, had me and 4 other siblings. I'm the middle of 5. Had a real strong ethic of working hard, and I think being creative, actually, when I look back from an early age. The fact that my father was able to get a scholarship to study his PhD in the early 80s. The fact that he was able to do that was tremendous, and he actually hustled his way to be able to do that, similar to my mum in terms of her coming to Europe to further her education. So I think that element, that entrepreneurial spirit of want something, see something, go get it, think about different avenues in terms of going to get that, has actually, when I think about it, when I look back, has helped me get to the point where I am creative in some of the things that I do, and I do have an appetite for taking some risk. Not always, but I do. But I think for me, the passion came when I really started getting into my leadership journey. I think when I was a manager, so mid-level, junior to mid-level in my career, I think as ever, there is an element of command control in terms of, I'd like to work in this parameter, I want to get a certain set of results, and I want the results to look like this, I want it all to be perfect, right? Or all to be at least 95%. And I think the beauty of almost just watching my own story develop and being the person kind of watching in on my own journey, watching myself change through my leadership journey. Before, I think leadership, we spoke openly about what it is to be a really great leader. We spoke openly about the topic that we're probably going to cover around kind of next generation leadership. I was going through my own journey before these kind of buzzwords were mainstream, and for me that was a journey of reflection. It was a journey of I was being told I would get to a senior level in my organization, but I was also being coached and given feedback in terms of how I can be a more effective leader. And I think also going through situations in my own personal life where I felt I had failed, right? So the breakup of a relationship, I was like, it's a failure. I just spent 3 years in this relationship, failure. And it was actually the only relationship that I had had. So I think for me, the reflection of, okay, failed relationship that wasn't right for me anyway, plus getting feedback at work, was a perfect storm for me to just reset, reevaluate, look at actually how I saw failures, and actually reset my view on I'm learning something. what do I want in my next relationship? Well, I want X, Y, Z, and guess what? It's my husband now. So, you know, I learned a lot, and what type of relationship, the connotation of a relationship was essential to me, because for me it was about emotion. And I looked at every element of relationship in my life, and I was like, I'm learning loads from this failed relationship, but that's okay, because any relationship that I have, I want the next ones to be to give me a sense of emotion. The same thing I want with my teams. So that made me a stronger leader. And I realized that the relationship that I have with anything, whether it's a client, team members, whoever, there has to be mutual benefit, right? But there also has to be understanding, communication, listening. I have to listen to what you want, just like you have to listen to what I want. And the bit, because maybe some of you who are like into design are like, what's this got to do with design? The bit that it's got to do with design is that if you can then construct something that the audience wants, you have something valuable. And I learned that lesson through, as I say, failure, right? Failed relationship. And for me at the time, oh my God, feedback was failure to me. At one point in my career, it was failure. Even though I was on this trajectory, I was on the path of becoming a partner in 10 years from graduating uni, but it was still failure to get feedback that wasn't perfect. So as I say, that really just helped me kind of blossom. And I think the Nigerian upbringing, in terms of, we worked hard, mum and dad, right? The voices, we worked hard to get to the position where we are here to give you more opportunity. And therefore, we want you to succeed. And therefore, in general, in Nigerian African culture, you know, there's less appetite for risk, there's less creativity. So I think it was all just that position of my life, that kind of mid-level manager, was, as I say, reflection. And it made me see the value actually in going outside of the edges. It made me see the value in not always succeeding and learning, because it's an experiment, because probably the next one is going to be even better. And I think coupled with then the element of emotion, the element of generating some level of positive emotion, some positive feeling. If I can design something, if I can create something that is adding value to someone's life, then that's an amazing emotional high, right? Happiness, inspiration, hope. Think of any positive emotion, that's what you get. So I think for me, it became this really beautiful journey that I was going on, that a lot of people were like, what, this is, Nigerian, normally very focused on winning, on success, not failing, not showing emotion, not showing weakness. And here I was, just getting a little bit more uncovered, unchipped every single time. So I think for me, that's where it came from.
Thank you, Ollie. If I can unpick something from what you were saying there about in the beginning about spotting avenues of opportunity and pursuing them, for you, from the way you were raised, that was a strong feature that you had, and you're now in a position where you're enabling that for others. What can or how can the organization do that for others who support that inclusion on the pathways that people are on?
So how can organizations support people in terms of their ability to be able to innovate and look for those opportunities? Yeah, so inclusion is massively important. I think the ability to just saying inclusion is not enough. You need to create the environment. We need to, as leaders and as organizations, as businesses, create environments that allow people to feel comfortable. Inclusion for me is about feeling comfortable, feeling like you belong. It's not diversity. Diversity is essentially the assessment of who do we have in the team, in the analogy, let's say, of a football team, right? Who do we have in the football team? Or as I like to give my dance analogy, given that we both have a link to dance, diversity is understanding actually that you've been invited to the dance. Inclusion is being asked to dance. And then you take that a step further, belonging is actually being asked to pick the song of your choice. So for me, if you do belonging and if you do inclusion, you get diversity. So I almost ignore diversity because for me, it can be a tick box. For me, the most important factor is inclusion. Making someone feel like they belong, making someone feel something positive, right? Because if I feel something positive, if I wake up and I go, hey, I want to go to work, that's a want, that's an inspiration, that's emotion, that's energy in motion, right? So a lot of the time when we are trying to communicate a value proposition, a story, anything, right? I'm trying to sell you a product or a service, a product that has been designed or a service that has been designed. Someone needs to have thought about it. I'm trying to connect with that audience. And so the emotion element can never be lost. So for me, allowing somebody to feel energy, emotion, that they belong is crucial, because you then allow that person to almost have the family feeling, right? Have you ever been told by maybe those of you with siblings, my God, like I get told by my siblings, you're a partner at Ernst & Young or at Accenture, because I'm just myself with my family. Right? Maybe I'm truly myself. They see me in a different level, right? Than maybe other people may see me. Now, I still bring my real self to work, but my family see a completely different side, as do all of our families. So for me, inclusion means an organization, a business, a team being able to generate that feeling of familyness, so that that person feels so comfortable that they can be themselves. If I feel comfortable to be myself, I'm more likely to put my hand up and challenge you on something that I potentially don't agree with. That challenge could actually be something that helps you down the line, in terms of not wasting time on something, pivoting in a different direction, or just understanding feedback, right? In terms of listening to, you may be the target audience, you may be the target consumer. So the ability to enable your teams to feel like they belong, so that they are able to be confident enough to not just challenge you, but also put their hand up and say, hey, I have an idea, maybe a different idea, it may be something completely wacky, but we welcome all of that. So for me, it's super important to be able to do that, and that's one of the key ways. It's really simple. You could just even ask questions, right? How do you, like, have we actually taken on board all of the thoughts of the teams? Is there anyone who doesn't think that this is a good idea? Maybe actually you don't want to say it in front of everyone because you think you're going to get spotlighted. Come and talk to me at the end, because I really, really want to get your views. Each one of your views means something to me. So that ability to just communicate and just, really kind of speak with emotion, speak with care, as opposed to I'm trying to tick the inclusion box, I'm trying to tick the diversity box, so I want to have a diverse team, but actually I'm not trying to go out of my way to make you feel like you're included, to make you feel like I'm going to ask you for a dance, to make you feel like I'm going to ask you to pick the song of your choice.
Thank you, Arlene. And that's so fascinating, and touches on something that I was a little bit cautious with when we talked about the title for today's session, Inclusion, Innovation, Impact. There's such a danger that these three terms become just buzzwords, or, as you were saying, a tick box. Oh yeah, we're being inclusive because we have 10 colors, we have 10 ethnicities. Oh, now we have an age spectrum, and we have equal numbers of men and women. But actually, the problem is, how do we then together create these environments where everyone feels included, not just as an aspiration, because it's a wonderful aspiration. Of course, we all sign up, but how do we come together as teams, as disciplines, for the organization or also externally to solve global challenges where everyone feels included and feels that they have a voice and a valid perspective and a valid contribution. And I think there's something true about design as well. Designers for a while now have been saying, hey, we want to be at the table, we want to be at the top level where there's strategic thinking, where there's innovation. And yet there's still a feeling that we're not quite there yet, even though those of us who are actively involved think, we've made it, we've arrived. But from the business perspective, when we look at design, where do you see the greatest opportunity to include design in the conversation? If we think design in the broader sense, design thinking, design of services.
I mean, one of my favorite topics. I mean, this audience, you guys are amazing because you are at the forefront. For a business not to recognize the great work that a designer can bring to the table is a missed opportunity. One of the biggest things I think that we have, and when we talk about innovation or disruption, what does that actually mean? For me, it means adding value to real people's lives, right? Real people, to add value to real people's lives, you typically offer them a service, right? To enhance their lives, or you offer them a product. Both of those things have a design element. Both of those things have the ability to, you could have something really complex, but if you design it in a way that is super easy to understand, like those books that maybe, I don't know, they say something like 10 top tips for dummies, right? You construct a really maybe complex topic in a way that's really easy to consume or easy to use, then bingo, you have something. And I think one of the things that we do a lot in organizations, in business, is like, for me, the two, even just saying in business, we're all in business, right? There's not, I don't see the two as separate. So with my teams, there are people from our design functions in the room with us, right? I'm working on an opportunity right now, and the key experts that I'm looking at to give me advice on this particular topic that I do not have the advice on actually come from the innovation team, that there's specific kind of digital innovation team, and this particular function, we have made a number of different acquisitions of specific design agencies. Similar when I was at Accenture, I can't count the number of design agencies that have been brought into the Accenture family, because we recognize the value, the skill that is brought. I think there's huge opportunity in terms of just the customer experience, the customer interface, the customer, ensuring that the customer is using something that feels really, really valuable to them, and if you design that in a certain way that, as I say, is easy to consume, easy to use, bingo. And I love going through the journeys where I think to myself, I've got comments on the design, but then when I speak to somebody else who completely does this full time in their job, and I'm blown away by how their mind works, which is obviously going to be completely different to mine. And there's a really interesting psychological aspect as well to design, which we don't tend to think about, we don't tend to do in business, because maybe, on the business side, because maybe it's a little bit quicker. But so for me, that there's huge opportunity to come together more in terms of, let's say, the teams who are maybe more focused on the kind of the market, the kind of the core clients that you're actually selling to, and having those conversations to understand the business requirements. But the two cannot be divorced. You can't have one without the other. You have to have, and as I said, on this very real opportunity I'm working at the moment, it is very much a blended team, blended set of skills. And I think if we don't do that, then we're doing the clients, consumers and customers that we serve a massive disjustice.
Thank you, Ollie. And you're talking there about adding real value and adding, creating impact. How would you personally define impact yourself? What does that mean to you?
For me, impact is the ability for energy in motion. right? So it's the ability to have either have some lasting change, some form of transformational change, or simply some decisive act. So that's the energy emotion. So you have an ability that you impacted me by your speech or by what you did in this new product. I mean, it took my mind into different ways, and you impacted me in a way that I'd never seen before for myself. And maybe that is going to cause me to reflect. That's my act. Or it's going to cause me to invest. That's my act. Or it's going to cause me to reach out to you. That's my act. So for me, the impact is where I or we have an ability to make some form of decisive action based on the energy we feel from something. But it's also about, for me, making some form of change for the better, some form of positive change. And that change could be small change, or it could be something really transformational, right, to your life. And for me, when I think about impacts, for me, it's all about the personal life. I work on a lot of projects with my clients. I help them move parts of their banks, right, or set up a part of the bank or close down a part of the bank. Great impact. Maybe there's financial impact, maybe there's operational impact, but maybe there's also people impact. People change roles. You support somebody maybe on their own journey going for a promotion, and this maybe is the big project that they're focused on. But I think that when you work on something that has the ability to change a life, the ability to change like your personal circumstance, for me, that gives me more impact. That gives me greater impact than financial impact. So yeah, when someone says, I loved hearing you talk, or what you said really helped me, that for me is nothing short of brilliant for me in terms of impact.
That's really fascinating, Ollie, to hear, because for us, working on inclusive design for business impact is how I like to think about impact. It's not as straightforward as we've done work with you, we've engaged, we've delivered something, and that's it, we've created impact. Actually, it's going to who you're impacting, or who is the person that wants to create an impact, whether that's the organization or a department within that. And what is the impact that they are seeking to create, whether that's for a community, whether they're wanting to engage in a sustainability conversation, so that then through the tools of design, we can help them create that value for someone else. And it's quite interesting, we often work on innovation projects that are opening a new product or a new service. Initially, inclusive design was set up specifically around 3 decades ago to look at aging and ability as your kind of customer base, but it's expanded so much from there to look at stakeholder inclusion, and actually through engaging different stakeholders to look at how can we add value for make life better, that's in the ethos, for whether that's for one person or for a community as a whole. And then how do we enable that process through design? What do the outcomes be? So if we go back to something I was saying in the beginning about building back better, and that innovation needs to be at the heart of that process of renewal, and the need for more inclusive approaches. Could that mean in practice for business, placing innovation at its heart?
I think getting obsessed, as I like to say, with customers, right? You mentioned the World Economic Forum earlier in your speech, and it made me think, because I saw something the other day which said that I think by 2025, innovation is going to be one of the top 2 skills as indexed by the World Economic Forum that the world needs. So it's huge. And quite frankly, we were talking about innovation 10 years ago. setting up the first fintech incubators 10 years ago. And actually, particularly in finance, where actually innovation is slow, right, compared to other industries like gaming or just products, etc. Finance can be quite slow. So even pre-pandemic, pre-COVID, really kind of helping our clients to get really immersed into innovation and enhancing the experience for customers and clients, as opposed to it takes, 2 weeks minimum to open up a basic bank account, right? That's just a really, really poor user experience. And that's just one example. Then I think that the fast forward of clearly pandemic and everything else over the last couple of years has forced businesses, particularly financial services organizations, to rethink. But I think no matter the industry or the sector, that the key thing that businesses can be doing more of in terms of enhancing your ability to innovate and add value is really being focused on the consumer or the client or whoever, or the customer, whoever is actually going to be using these services. And whether you are doing some form of design thinking or whether you are brainstorming in a different way, understanding what value means to the person that you're trying to add value to is number one. And if I don't understand you as a group of people or as an individual, or as the target audience, the consumer base, the customer base, the client base, then how can I know what your real challenges are? It's like, if I don't understand, if I'm trying to solve a challenge or design something for a group of Black females, I'll just give myself as an example. If I haven't spent the time or the effort to understand actually what am I designing for, who are this particular group of people, what are the things that they actually would really, really value today because things change, what are the challenges that this particular group of people may face right now, and so on and so on and so on. If I'm not obsessed with this particular group, then how can I really understand the challenges, the pain points, the issues that they have, and therefore how can I address them, right? Or how can I even start to address them, and including actually your clients in that process of coming up with a solution, as opposed to actually solutioning alone, right? But actually making it a two-way street, to the point where even in financial services, right, you're offering a service or a set of products to real customers, like high street customers, and you actually go and meet these high street customers, maybe in not in the bank, but actually in places where they actually they go. So really getting a bit more embedded in your customers' lives and their journeys, more so than you would have had to before. And that comes the inclusion point. There are so many things that we've probably all said in our vocabulary that we never said in our vocabulary, or never allowed ourselves to say in our vocabulary 2 years ago, but we're saying it now. And that means that we're learning more about different groups of people. We're being more inclusive. So the more inclusive you can be, the more obsessed you can be, the more true and honest you can be to the group of people or the communities that you're trying to serve. But if you don't invest the time to understand them, to understand the challenges, to unpick, I may say to you, how are you? You may say, yeah, I'm fine, because you don't think I really care. But if I took the time to really care, to really understand actually, how are you, like with meaning, how was your day? Why was it bad, etc. Maybe you'll give me something more. So I think that that's the same process I see in business. We have to invest time to be with one another. We have to invest time to actually get to know one another. I think that's crucial.
And I think there was something when we were doing our initial discussion in preparation for today, you said something beautiful there. I was asking you, well, how do we make the case for design at the topmost level, or for that inclusive innovation and design as part of that? And you just said to me, well, it just makes perfect business sense. It's to do that. It's like I wanted to ask today, how do we balance kind of a very process-driven, a very data-driven organizational mindset with a more people-centered or inclusive mindset?
I think that also takes it may make sense to certain people, but I think that also takes a shift, right, in the corporation, where, as you say, some things have been more maybe historically done, or you operate in a certain way, right? And I think the ability to change cultures is tough, but actually I think inclusive behaviors, sometimes we have to give it a hand, and sometimes that comes from the top. So sometimes that is also about really making a clear stance that inclusive behaviors are a must, and we won't tolerate anything else. And if you look at how a lot of business leaders in organizations will be remunerated, they'll largely be remunerated based on financial performance, right, or the part of their division. But actually changing that so that it's not just about that, but it's also about people. It's also about how you lead teams. It's also about what your teams say about you. It's also about how you have been in terms of your ability to be inclusive. And that leads me on to something else in terms of the ability for businesses to measure inclusion. I don't think we're there yet. And it's actually something that I'm working on right now in terms of how can businesses better measure inclusion, right? We can measure diversity, and we can say that we're going to be, 50-50 by 2030, right? Ambitious, or whatever the stat is. And because you can gather the data, even gathering the data is a challenge, especially in Europe. But you can gather data, you can gather the evidence that tell you that. But how do you measure how someone feels? Yes, you can ask lots of questions, but then how do you ensure that it's normalized and it's done in a fair way, etc.? So I don't think we're there yet, but that shouldn't stop us from actually ensuring that we go on that journey. And I think it's important that leaders of organizations take some of that responsibility and actually lead with that at the forefront, because ultimately that will help to change the culture of the organization in terms of shifting the focus, in terms of actually having leaders be assessed also on their contributions to how they engage people, how they engage teams, how they build teams, not just wanting to pick the best teams, but actually picking teams who you're able then to nurture and to grow. So we're not there yet on the measurement of inclusion. Nothing exists that's solid, but I think we will be getting there.
Oh, that's so fascinating, Ollie, and we probably want to work with you on that. From our perspective, we've looked at, in a project we did for an Asian airline, we were looking at actually how they measure performance and performance indicators. And we realized there's a big mismatch between how senior management thinks about performance and how people on the ground think about performance and what a good day is for them. Right. And actually looking at shifting that performance aspirations or something else that speaks more to the health and well-being of the individual and how they feel included. What inspires them, as you were saying, to come to work and to be that active contributing member of staff. And I love that you've brought this back to leadership, which is what we started with. Would you have any final thoughts on kind of your take on next generation leadership? And then we'll start addressing some of the questions from the audience.
Sure. I think for me, next generation leadership is leading with impact. It's that simple. It's just leading with some impact. It's not leading because of your role title, right? It's not hi. I was really happy that you actually, in your introduction, you told everyone what you did, and then you said your name at the end. That's how I like to introduce myself as well. So it's not leading with a title. It's not leading with the role that you do or the coverage that you have. It's just leading with who you are. right? So it's disarming, I think, your ability to be the scary hierarchical kind of management leader, and it's the ability to actually have to focus in on being a human being first in your leadership, and realizing that your teams are human beings, all with real stories, real lives, you know, real people who they probably go back home to, real challenges, real stresses, real worries that they probably don't bring into the office. So it's the ability to kind of understand and navigate that entire melting pot of emotions, right, that come with human life. For me, in terms of some specifics, it's also, as a leader, your ability to be vulnerable, to be empathetic, to really kind of, you know, ascertain the person and kind of mirror the person who you may be speaking to at the time, and understand what they may need in their career or in their journey. So as I say, being empathetic to the person who you may be coaching or speaking to or having your team. But it's also, for me, in terms of next generation leadership, it's the creativity, it's the entrepreneurialism, and it's the innovation. It's the ability to take risks. It's the ability to, you know, potentially ask for permission. Sorry, not ask for permission, but ask for forgiveness. It's the ability to try and fail, and encourage that with other people. Because if you don't, you'll never know. But actually, as you say, it could make a really good story if you do fail. So not seeing failure as something that is bad, and not seeing rejection as something that's bad. And then I think also, quite lastly, it's everything that we've been talking about today. It's the ability to be an inclusive leader. It's the ability to bring a diverse set of thinking, thoughts, people, skills to the table. It's the ability to collaborate with also unlikely collaborators, competitors, you know, people who, it doesn't need to be a competitor, but unlikely people. And thinking in a way that isn't so one directional in terms of the share price, you know, which way the share price is going to go, or the financial impact, which of course is all very, very important. But shareholders, customers, clients, we're driven by more than that these days. We're driven by responsibility, responsible business. We're driven by sustainability, creating something that's lasting. Right? Some of us have to address our children who may have questions on, you know, what are we doing to contribute to a better world, a better society, a better community? How do you answer those questions? So for me, next generation leadership, as I say, is leading with impact, as opposed to from, I would say, what people may see as a more traditional style of leadership.
Thanks, Ollie. And I think in that you have beautifully answered the first question in our Q&A, which was from Duncan. What daily behaviors can leaders make to bring inclusion in practice? So I'd like to go to a different question, which is from Ben Williams. In an age of ever more cuts and job losses, how do we ensure impact is considered in terms of supporting the people with the greatest needs, rather than impact being considered in terms of affecting the widest number of people?
I think that's an assessment in terms of prioritizing certain characteristics that you may define as impact, because I don't think one is greater than the other. But I think the ability to understand the group of people that you want to apply some level of impact to, and making sure that you have some notion of strategy or plan to ensure that you can actually impact those groups of lives is important. I think sometimes what gets lost is the ability to convert a plan into actual action. So regardless of who the group is, I wouldn't say one group is more important than the other, but I think the focus should be on actually converting, so actually have an impact, right? And sometimes it's easy to talk about the want to have impact, the need to have impact, but how do you actually do that? And I think making sure that there's a really clear, concise, cohesive, efficient, structured plan that has buy-in from all the necessary stakeholders, and you've got the key people doing the things that they need to do with as I say, buy-in, which is crucial, is going to be key to making sure that you have impact in any of those scenarios.
Thanks, Ollie. And that speaks quite nicely to another question, which is around how decisions are being made from the business perspective. So many businesses would know customers through their data and are uncomfortable making decisions based on emotion. You talked about emotion earlier. How can designers or creative practitioners influence decision makers to be comfortable making decisions using qualitative data or qualitative insight?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? It got a bit muddled.
How can designers influence decision makers to be comfortable making decisions using qualitative insight?
Okay. Yeah, as opposed to quantitative, right? Yeah. That we all love in business. Yes. So I think quite frankly, the ability to storytell is the way you have your aha moment when it comes to, I think, qualitative data, because sometimes all you need is just one effective story, one effective example, one effective way of speaking for a whole community of people by one effective story of somebody else's, because somebody can see, maybe the person that you're speaking to in the business can see themselves, or they can see their child, or they can see their mother, their parents, their friends, whoever. So I think your ability to storytell in any aspect of data, whether you are quantitative data, I was talking to someone about how to negotiate the right salary, very quantitative, regardless of what it is, storytell. That's essential, because your story should always have the peaks and the troughs, right? Mm-hmm. It should have the issue, it should have the challenges, it should have the context. Why is this so important? And then it should have the big peak moment, right? The almost the hero villain concept, in terms of, and if we address this, right, what would a future look like if we were all XYZ? So I think your ability to storytell is essential in that. Maybe starting off the kind of pitch with a question, with a thought-provoking question.
And that would be also true for design, particularly inclusive design. It's not, yes, we are designing to address the needs of the one person, that is the specific and unique to them, their hopes, fears, aspiration, but then we're taking that and we're seeing how that one story can actually create better solutions and better futures for all of us. There's a comment and a question from Caroline in the chat. Love what you said about involving emotion with relationships more in business. I feel like this is deliberately removed from some of the conversations. How can we do this? Or what kinds of questions can we ask our colleagues in design?
Great question. I think you're right. I think it is almost deliberately removed, but I think the voice is coming back, or the voice is starting, and I think that's because we're having more truthful, open conversations, or just monologues, right? You look on social media and somebody is being a little bit more vulnerable about their particular scenario or circumstance. So even though I mentioned before that leaders need to do more in organizations to allow people to be themselves, and maybe doing more means changing how they're also remunerated, I think there is also recognition that we're all human beings. So I think some leaders and businesses do recognize that. I think in terms of your question around what can designers be doing to ensure that we don't remove the emotion and the aspect of the need to humanize content, the need to humanize our lives and our relationships in the things that we do. I think I think also, I'm sorry to say, but would also come down to storytelling. Storytelling is essential in business. It really is. It's probably an underrated skill that we need to do more of. And your ability to, I told you all the story, right? I told you all the story of when I had a failed relationship, and now we're talking about it. So the ability to tell us, analogies, examples, stories, speak with stories. This gets you quite far, even if you, a good way to kind of make yourself, also be more authentic, and because you're being more yourself, and a good way to relax in terms of allowing yourself to feel like you can be more yourself and feel like you can be vulnerable to tell that story, right, is to be ready to just share something about yourself and really speak to the why it is important. So when you're saying, okay, how do I translate this really important thing that I know is really important because I know I'm going through it, or because my son is going through it, or because of XYZ, give them an example, give them an analogy. It doesn't need to be you, but give them an analogy, right? So I gave you an analogy earlier around dance because Nelly and I like to dance. So I gave you the inclusion analogy and the diversity and belonging analogy with my dance, with the dance analogy, sorry. I could have done that with a football team, with a basketball team, anything that gives us commonality, right, that we all probably are aware of. So I think your ability to storytell through using analogies, using examples, using stories, using emotion, using your voices, speaking with emotion, not monologue, speaking with emotion, pausing when you speak for the dramatic effect, giving me a question, a thought-provoking question that I'd never considered before. Imagine if I could change your life, right? Like starting off your pitch with something thought-provoking, as opposed to, hi, my name's Ollie, and I'm here today to talk to you about innovation, inclusion, and impact. But actually starting off your conversation, your pitch, with something that gets them bought in immediately, with a vision that they want to be part of, so that you don't have to do the work. You create that vision of, wouldn't it be great if, and then go into it. So do not underestimate storytelling. Sorry to sound like a broken record, but it is.
No,
it is
that's very helpful, Ollie.
In these points.
And definitely, I think when we talk about impact, going back to that vision, what was the original vision and what was the person? I think we maybe have time for only one more question. So I'll take a question from Melanie Flory. Ollie, what has been your experience of creating the fine balance needed between listening and caring, and including each person's views, needs, pain points, and the demands of a measure-based deliverables, such as deadlines, market context, competition, time-sensitive opportunities, bottom line profit? So how do you balance the two?
Great question, and it almost gave me shivers, because it's something very real that I've had to balance, and I actually got to the point where, because I would just speak to lots of people to get input, the qualitative as well as the quantitative, but it was really important to be in the market, either with my clients, which was always seen as a great thing, because I'm speaking to clients, I'm in the market, I'm gaining insight, I'm building opinion, so that's great, but I was also speaking to my teams, right? Because sometimes if I'm working with a client on maybe a banking application, maybe the target users are actually my people in my team. So I'm also speaking to my teams, but I'm also speaking to them on a personal level. And I think then also understanding other people in the organization who you just want to feel more included. So you end up speaking to lots of more people and almost coaching different people and empowering and encouraging. And I had to get to a point where I would color coordinate my diary, which I still do, to understand where am I spending, which types of meetings am I having throughout the day. But I think for me, it was something that I was not going to compromise on, like at all. And yes, it's easier given the role I have, given the level that I have. It is easier. But that's why I feel like I have to do even more. So I have to be quite loud on this topic, because it's expected from the people that mean dearly to me, because they're the people growing up through the organization who need to see inspiration, hope, and going back to that aspect of stewardship and sustainability. It's super, super important. So that was something that I'm just not going to compromise on. And it was very clear to my new employer that I wouldn't be compromising on that. So I think being able to recognize the balance, put in place certain measures that help you prioritize, right? That help you see where you're spending your time, but also shifting it so that, and this isn't easy, and I've only just started to realize how to do this, but thinking about how you can actually turn the conversations that you may be having in terms of, all the things that we've mentioned, into an opportunity for everyone. So, for example, as you know, we've not touched on mergers and acquisitions, but I do a lot of that. I also do innovation, but I also love to speak on diversity, inclusion, and actually advocate on that. And as a consultant, as I'm sure many of you will know, I work with large corporations. I'm also encouraged to bring in business, but then I'm talking a lot about diversity and inclusion and advocating for that, which I'm not going to compromise on. However, one of the things that I am doing more of these days is thinking actually about how to create more of a service so that I'm actually helping my clients create better, inclusive organizations. And this comes down to the framework I mentioned before in terms of how do you measure inclusion? That's something very real that I'm working on right now to help organize, and it stemmed actually from my course with Stanford, in terms of just the innovation challenge that I set myself, which was this topic. And it just snowballed into now this thing, this project, this live thing, where we are now really helping organizations become more inclusive organizations, quite far removed from mergers and acquisitions. But it doesn't matter, because it's beneficial to the organization. It's also the balancing act of your question in terms of allowing me to contribute to my business in a different way, in terms of addressing the bottom line, right? Which is the balance that we can't ignore. So I think you need to essentially understand what your non-negotiables are going to be, particularly if the topic is really important and people need to hear you. People need to know that it's important that they exist, that they're in the team, that because that increases productivity. So it's a win-win. But at the same time, measure and prioritize where you put your efforts, and then think about ways where everyone can win. That would be my advice.
Thank you, Ollie. And that's such a wonderful note and message to end on. I have so many takeaways from today, particularly, inclusion, innovation, impact. As I said, we chose them as a provocation, but they're not just buzzwords. Or how do we ensure that they don't get lost in the vocabulary of today? So, Ollie, you have given us great examples and advice in terms of how do we begin to actualize them. And I think for us as inclusive designers, that's the next realm. How do we work with organizations to help them build that inclusive innovation capacity from within? So not just products and services anymore, but innovation capacity. There's the need for real clarity, meaning, purpose, vision, communication, and inclusion that is very intentional and focused on how it's adding real value to the person of one. And before we end for today, I have a couple of brief announcements from the Helen Hamlin Center for Design. We have a couple of events coming up in February. 7th of February, we have one on neurodiversity and design. And on the 24th of February, so only a month away, I'm hosting a panel discussion on design and business continuity, where Ollie will be returning, this time as part of a panel discussion with design management and technology experts. So thank you, Ollie. And before I say goodbye, I would like to thank the RCA Executive Education team for creating this platform, and Joe Chonta in particular for all the hard work behind the scenes and being such a wonderful host. Over to you, Joe.
Thank you, Ninella. Thank you, Ollie, for sharing your thoughts and expertise. Thank you to everyone who joined us for today's in-session talk. Please follow us on social media at RCA Short Courses on Twitter and Instagram, and make sure to check our event webpage for upcoming in-session talks and how to register for free. You can see it on the slide as well. Thank you for your time, and goodbye, everybody. Bye.